So elastic fabrics, I've talked about this quite a few times. It was 1 year ago that I did a presentation here, and this is a little bit of a recap. There's been a lot of changes and some new things happening over the last year, and I wanted to give a bit of an update about where we're at. So here I was chatting about the future of ISP infrastructure, namely small medium ISPs, the impact that elastic fabrics can take on that, and what could be happening. The possibilities of elastic fabrics in the enterprise space and the service provider space, and ultimately in some parts of the consumer space. The cloudification of infrastructure, such as virtual Cisco, Juniper, A10, everything else in cloud providers, and providing a lot of that functionality on a network functional virtualization sort of and scalable methods, as opposed to buying hardware and rolling out existing classical infrastructure. The concept of using the cloud ISP, using the elastic fabrics and how that could work. And I said at the time that it should be possible to build a cloud ISP in about the next 6 to 18 months. But more about that in a minute. So, after that conference last year, Craig Scroggie from NextDC approached me and went, "You've been talking a lot about these elastic fabrics. Can you build me one?" So at the conference, wholesale conference in Sydney recently, I did a talk about the actual building of Axon and what I rolled out there. And it was a very interesting project, and we did it in about 10 months. I put a great team together, and it was officially launched, I think, yesterday by Simon Cooper, and it has been a fantastic ride, being able to build something so greenfields with bleeding edge and cutting edge technology. We ended up going just a little brief there, Arista Core with a few little other vendors in there, pure VXLAN, fully diverse infrastructure, port lags available, the cloud partners are on board, the marketplace is coming. Very, very carrier friendly, and most carriers, as you saw yesterday, are involved. 10 and 40 gig ports available now, and other speeds coming soon, 100 gig, and including the new Ethernet speeds that not a lot of people seem to be aware of, but is now appearing in hardware, which is 25 and 50 gig Ethernet speeds. So that was a quite interesting time. That sets up another significantly large sort of independent, neutralish elastic fabric, and I've come basically, as the IntelliGo, we've handed over operations to the excellent NetOps team at Axon VX, and I'm very, very keen to see how they go and the markets that they move into. And of a lot of the conversations that I'm privy of, I'm very excited with a lot of the people they're talking to and the solutions that people are thinking about. So this 2015 so far, what's been happening in the elastic sort of fabric space? Telstra bought PacNet just at the end in December last year, and they decided to keep Pan alive. And while there hasn't been a lot of impact in the marketplace about it, they are actually talking to people. It's been very interesting about their very willingness and excitedness to engage other elastic fabrics, interconnect, and do quite a few different things. So Telstra, while they are a bit quiet, especially in the Penn State, which is really actually Telstra Global, they are doing things, and I'm very interested to see what changes they come up with soon and how they participate in the fabric and interconnection market. So Megaport, I might have built Axon, but my first love and Bevan and the others is still Megaport and what they do at the moment. They've taken a new productization and sort of innovation like the Hills Hoist, Australian one, and taken it globally. They're in 4 countries, 36 DCs at the moment, 4 DCs in Singapore and Hong Kong, and they've just had a massive launch across the US using this new sort of elastic fabric way of doing things. They've just last week, we're a platinum sponsor of AWS reInvent, and we're on stage in front of thousands telling every people about this, and they are inundated, and the Americans are excited. Axon VX launched at Sydney Wholesale Summit. It became out of stealth mode and officially launched yesterday. Equinix Cloud Exchange, don't really know kind of what they're doing. What I believe is actually has a pretty good infrastructure that doesn't seem to go anywhere and don't do anything. They seem to have Azure and AWS, but they don't seem to have much of an ecosystem marketplace. I wish they did, because I think they could do a really amazing things. But when you're in sort of vendor world, I guess that's the way to say them, is that they're in their own DCs, not really expanding outside their DC, so the coverage doesn't really get huge. I'd really love to actually see them do that. I don't see, and NextDC is doing the same thing with Axon. They're going everywhere, it's not just NextDC. I don't see why Equinix can't do the same thing with points of presence and start to play in that space a bit better and creating a nice, bigger ecosystem. So that's 2015 so far, and that's a busy year, just with how fast Megaport has gone. So the fabrics are built. Where are we now? So the fabrics are built, Megaport's leading the global awareness, and the world is taking notice. The UK, Europe, Asia, there's a lot going on. They've got more Asia coming soon with Kuala Lumpur and other places like those on their maps. They've got Europe marked down. This is a global phenomenon, and which others are going to start emulating even more so around the world. Others in Australia are also chatting about it. I keep having quite a lot of people actually chatting to me going, so if we wanted to get into this space, my advice is carriers, don't even try. People, unless you're going to be one of those carriers that suddenly allow every other carrier to be a partner and actually make a decent fabric, the neutral players really need to be the guys that are going to do this, or do it in a very neutral way. You know what I mean? That all participants can play. These locked out little hidden ecosystems, kind of like Penn, which is really just Telstra-ish, and Equinix, there's a reason they're not taking off and that they're small ecosystems. They need to open up. They need to interconnect. You know what I mean? So if you're going to try and build one, if you're a carrier or a provider or someone that wants to look at building that, you need to take some of these things into consideration. So Singapore, I did a talk about elastic fabrics at the Singapore NOG, SG NOG, and they seemed quite surprised at the whole thing. While Megaport had actually managed to get up and running, the actual industry there and the network operators didn't really seem to know much about it, but lost their minds when we explained it. We're inundated with meetings of not just carriers, but people that are interested in getting into the business, and more interestingly, some actual hardware vendors. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then my regional manager for Asia, Rom Sok, did a talk about elastic fabrics in Cambodia at the launch of KHNOG over there. And just for more of an informational reason, sort of tell them about the elastic fabric revolution that's sort of coming. To the point that I think within a few days, Josh from Megaport was getting calls from Cambodian ISPs asking them about when they're coming. People are very excited, even in places like Cambodia, about how they can do it. I said, yes, actually not a market there at the moment, but that wasn't the point. They're excited. So more fabrics are coming. The idea is being embraced globally. Expect people to look at Megaport, Axon and others and Equinix and start to emulate those in different marketplaces around the world. It's no longer a fad or an interesting idea. It's really actually making an impact, especially on the revenue models of some of the corporates that I've got on these elastic fabrics that are starting to save a lot of money and being able to move a lot of traffic around and access services that they never could in different ways before. So the next wave of elastic fabrics, the Layer 2 service delivery revolution in 2016. I've probably worked in the last 4 or 5 months with over about 50 companies that are planning to deliver some sort of multi-tenantable Layer 2 services that they can put on every fabric. I might have built Axon. I like Megaport. I tell them to get onto everything that's available because it's the same everywhere. When you can do Layer 2 and VLANs on one of them, you can do it on all of them. So if you've got your nice little core infrastructure at the edge for cloud fabrics, join them all. If you want to do 4K video platforms, you want to do VPN systems, you want to do storage, join them all. And a lot of them are bringing ideas to me going, would this work? Would this fly? And this is a new kind of an OTT, you know. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Carriers now get it. Every major carrier in Australia Australia has had conversations now about the elastic fabrics. Some of them are a little slower than others. Some of them are like, does this compete? Does this hurt us? Hang on, if we don't, what happens? Hang on, what could we do? I was talking to one major carrier where I was like, well, you've got all this cloud services, but you could sell that to people that are on other carriers, which they'd never really thought of before, because most carriers are kind of closed off with what they do. You know, Telstra sells what's on Telstra, Optus sells what's on Optus. But with some of these fabrics, why not? Especially at the speeds we're talking about. Intercap, local cap, buildings, the building revolution at the moment. I'm going to jump to building to DC Blur. I'm working with a few people at the moment that are looking at saying, we're no longer in an island in a building in North Sydney or the CBD of Melbourne. People are taking dark fibre, buying 10 gig, because dark is so cheap. When you're talking $1,000 to get from the CBD of Melbourne out to NextDC or Equinix or something like that, that is nothing. 10 gig, throw that in, and if it's dark fibre, costs you about 10, 15 grand to light that up to 400 gig and pay the carrier nothing more. You can throw that into a building, connect up 500 companies in a building, give them free access, 500 megabits a piece, and actually have them know you're not actually in that building anymore. You're actually in Equinix, NextDC, Vocus DC, and actually have that access. You no longer need to worry about being in the building that you're in if you get a bit of dark, or someone aggregates that. And with Vocus and FirstPath and a lot of the others, there's no reason that's not very easy to do these days. And those carriers with those sort of tails are starting to join the elastic fabrics as well. So people in a building does not just have to be in a DC to be on Megaport. You could be almost anywhere with this sort of speeds and these sort of cost savings. Hardware vendors are in. OTT is their new drug. Now, we've seen that happen all across the world at the moment. People like Microsoft just bypassing the channel, selling the service directly. There's no space for a lot of the channel unless you're innovating. People selling directly. The Netflix, nobody gets any money from that in reality. You know, they're the ones that get it straight away. Everyone pays for the infrastructure to deliver it, but they get nothing for it. So OTT is the new big thing. So in Singapore, I had hardware vendors like serious storage vendors like Seagate, the actual people that make this kit. And I had this a meeting in Sydney the other day with a Russian one that's got a massive cloud storage products and everything else like that want to plug directly into the fabrics. So they will be bypassing the stores and the channels that are selling this kit and doing petabytes of storage and capacity straight to businesses over these fabrics. People need to start thinking about this, thinking about the alliances that carriers and people like that can make to try and stay in part of this game. We're now entering a new innovation phase. This coming year there is going to be so many ideas. I love innovation. I get hired for innovation to come up with ideas and new products. But even I can only come up with so much because I've only got so much context. So many people are coming to me every week or two. I hear new ideas about that, what could be pushed over the elastic fabrics and how they could be done. And I'm just like, I hadn't thought of that. That's very, very interesting. And yes, this thing, a silly question, the thing you hear about the companies that come to me is that I keep just starting with, it's layer 2 VLANs. You've been doing this for 20 years. That's all you need to know. If you can do that, it's that simple. So you really don't have to keep running your ideas past me. It's not that hard. It's one of the easiest things in the world that anyone to do. Integrators. It's a very sad world, actually. I say anyone that's over 40 years old that actually hasn't been actively keeping track and updated in IT at the moment, like most of us here, we are. I come across a lot of people that are still wondering why no one's buying servers in an Exchange server anymore and things like that. They're dead. And a lot of them aren't actually evolving. They're just shutting down. I would have seen this year, I would have seen at least a dozen that I've known just exit. You know, there's nothing even to sell. You know, how do you even sell some of those business? The new virtual or online integrators, where they're managing whole Office 365 infrastructures and Google apps and everything else like that. These guys aren't moving forward. And their vendors, the traditional integrators with their relationships with HP and Dell and Microsoft and that, it's just all dying. You know, the vendors are in trouble themselves. You know, so and the carriers need to rethink their value add. if you're going to lock it off, if you're going to keep it to yourself, one of the examples that comes to mind is Presto. It just sits on the Telstra network. Didn't bother peering. Sucks to be them. You know what I mean? You want to keep something to yourself and claim it, oh, if you go and be on Telstra, it'll be nice and fast for you. Yeah, that's why Presto's where it is today. You know, and there's a reason that some of the others are doing a lot better, because it's open, you're peering, you're letting ISPs do massive amounts of traffic, and it makes things a lot easier without the constant retraining of speeds and other issues. So carriers need to think a lot of their value add in their cloud offerings, in their storage, in their MSP space. Everybody's trying to think what they're trying to do. So, Cloud ISP update of a year ago when I said it should be possible. Yes, I'm launching it in about I think it's next week. I had a pile of kit around. My new country manager said, what are we doing with all this stuff? Well, it's sitting in storage. I've got enough equipment to build a couple of ISPs over. You know, why don't we put it out there? Because so one of the big specialties we do is we build small ISPs for people. We get referrals from Telstra and from other people where Telstra Wholesale and that people with an idea want to launch an ISP targeting a specific industry, but they've got no hardware or expertise, but they've got the great business and way in. So we help people build those. And one of the heartbreaking things that's happened over the few years is a lot of ISPs have gone to the wall because while you give them a network, they can't run the business. And eventually it crashes or something like that, or they get bored. There's lots of different reasons. So why did I build it? One of the reasons I built it was to lower the cost of entry and speed. And to build it for these entrepreneurs and people that have got a business idea to validate it. Could it happen? So I took a bunch of physical kit, you know, Juniper MXs and Cisco's and everything. I always say to people, ISPs are three parts: external, transit, peering, the core network, and your tails, for the people that resell other people's tails. And the Elastic ISP was built specifically in mind to only replace the core. You still have to go and get your relationship with Telstra Wholesale, Focus, IC, NBA Cup, whatever you want to do. Deliver it into this core. It'll allow you to not have to have any 6 weeks or 3 months for equipment to arrive. No capex, very little capex costs compared to what it used to be, and the time to set it up. And you keep all your relationships, where you're just using this as a temporary and as a Kickstarter method. So that's who I built it for, the people starting. Now I said last time the missing pieces, because Amazon and Azure, they're layer 3 networking and it sucks, right? It really is a nightmare to build stuff on. If you want service, great. If you want layer 2, inside and outside firewalls, LNS, PPPoE, broadcast, and the things that are part of a network, they didn't really work. I don't know how many people here know about Orion VM. They're one of the hidden little people in the industry. They are AWS equivalent. They just decided they didn't want to play in that retail space. So they are the OEM version. If you want to build your own cloud provider, you go to these guys. These guys came out of UTS. They're 3 kids that came out of UTS that are now so big, they've just built the cloud for AT&T in the US. They used to do the cloud here for APT, I believe, but when the TPG things changed. But in the US, they're just launching that. These guys' network is very, very different as a cloud provider. Pure layer 2. InfiniBand networking. You can do layer 2 different VLANs, do instances, move them around, push them over elastic fabrics like Megaport and Axon, and do what you want in any way you want. We're already testing A10, Cisco, Juniper virtual routers, all on their infrastructure, which is basically the same as AWS's capabilities. Beautiful. I can almost ramp up full-size MXs and Juniper and Cisco ASRs and everything else like that, their virtual models, in a complete virtual environment in pure layer 2 without needing any physical kit. I might shut down Elastic ISP hardware-wise in the next 6 months and move people to pure virtual. There will always be a space for physical side though in some of the switching aspects. So the wholesale providers are helping, which I've been very helpful to. People are giving us shared ag ports to let people actually start an ISP kind of in 24 hours. APNIC membership in half a day. Tails from FirstPath, Opticom, actually access to Megaport in a shared fashion in under 24 hours. Most of the time it probably won't happen in that time frame, but it could if it was actually needed. But that's how fast to take tails from a carrier and get started very quickly. So we're launching this month. We've got my only worry is that may have more people signed up than my own infrastructure is actually even really capable of. I designed it for about 20 to 30 micro ISPs kickstarting, and I think we're almost at 70-80% of, and that's pre-signed before even the hardware's gone into the data center. So that's kind of very interesting. But with the Orion VMs and Ordnance, so a little brief about Ordnance. Ordnance is kind of like the big brother version of Elastic ISP, using real hardware in real data centers across Australia, doing hosted layer 3, LNSs, carrier grade network firewalls, using real hardware, not virtualized, and sharing that tenancy so people don't actually need to buy it in a big way. And while Australia's been a little slow on the uptake, but quite passionate, the Americans, we know what they do. They are fanatical and passionate to an extreme. And they are engaging Megaport in serious ways that I'm very, very impressed by. And the other people that come along and join this world and offer similar services and play well with others, you're going to do very well too. Small can make a big impact. You can sit at home in your home office running an infrastructure, virtual ISPs, virtual layer 2 service deliveries. You do not need big anymore. I've got a customer in Canberra that does significant amounts of dark fibre for some federal government customers, and he has no office and makes a significant amount of money. And it's just because of his clearance, his relationships and everything else like that. That's what it's all about. You can be tiny and do very well and take a lot of business away from the incumbents. It's not too late to get on board. This is not that hard technically. Seems to be a bit hard politically in some of the bigger organisations. The bigger they are, the harder they are to even talk to each other in different departments. But that will change soon once people start losing business and they need to realise they need to get involved very quickly. You need to think about how it'll fit into your business models and what it will do today and how you can work with it and who you want to, and if you want to be a part of this future. Thank you.